Food insecurity in post-conflict zones and refugee camps can be a vital issue for families and individuals who have already been traumatized by the effects of the war, now have to live with the fact that they can't trust the food system around them. War and conflict can affect a country in many ways and forms. It can affect individuals, communities, and even basic needs. Food insecurity is one of the greatest ongoing epidemics of our current generation, which affects countries that are war-torn in a post-conflict situation or hosting refugees in refugee camps. With conflict around the world increasing gradually, we have a higher chance of encountering refugees and displaced people. According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, the UNHCR, there are currently 357 million kids which live in conflict or post-conflict zones, and 254 million persons which are refugees. The increase in the number of refugees would also increase the lack of availability of food to such a large slice of the world's population. Countries such as Syria, Yemen, and South Sudan represent 57% of the world's refugees in the current time. Those three countries have all experienced conflict and war in their times, which has affected the people, making them either flee out as refugees or stay in the country and end up dead. Civil wars in South Sudan has affected the distribution and accessibility of food in the country, making the country declare itself in an emergency state due to famine and food insecurity. Syria has been ripped apart by the ongoing war between the government, rebels, and terrorist groups, which overall led to food security becoming even worse. Yemen has faced a lot of serious problems through the past decade, as the war between the Yemeni government and the Houthi rebels continues. The people of Yemen are the ones suffering. A cholera epidemic started in the country, and food became much harder to get, since most ports got destroyed or became under the control of the rebels. These three major countries show us how conflict can affect food security and how much of a critical issue. 224 million children are undernourished, 462 million adults are underweight, 836 million people live in extreme poverty. Food shortage is one of the most extreme issues in today's world. People are constantly dying due to unsafe or contaminated food and water, and are living in famines in some of the poorest parts of the world. The only solution to this would be by ensuring food security in these places. Famine and starvation. Food shortage and insecurity due to conflict and war often lead to a large increase in famine and starvation in a certain country or region. Starvation and famine causes lots of deaths and serious health issues. The United Nations classifies malnutrition as a case of starvation, where 20% of population faces extreme food shortages with limited ability to cope. Acute malnutrition rates exceed to 30% for children under 5. There are 2 deaths per 10,000 people, or 4 deaths per 10,000 children per day. Famine and starvation almost always manifest their effects and symptoms such as disease and epidemics, as malnutrition leads to weaker immune systems and therefore a greater chance of succumbing to diseases. The 21st century has seen relatively few cases of famine as compared to the 20th century, which saw significant amounts. However, there remain areas around the world where famine is prevalent and more severe than ever in history. Malnutrition effects, mental and physical effects on population and global health. When people live in an area where food shortage and insecurity is common, they tend to be more prone to malnutrition, since they are not receiving the correct form of nutrition into their systems. Malnutrition then affects people's mental stability and physical performances. Immune systems of people who suffer from malnutrition is much worse than the average immune system. Therefore, health epidemics are more likely to occur in regions where malnutrition is common between the people. Yemen is facing one of the greatest food crises in its history, classified as Phase 5 on the IPC. A total of 50,000 children died due to hunger and disease in 2017. Yemen is currently host to 1.8 million undernourished children and 8 million children who do not have secure, reliable access to food and water. This famine is the product of the Yemeni civil war, a conflict that began on the 22nd of March 2015 and has continued to this current day. Although food is arriving to the ports of Yemen, it has no way to reach the people of Yemen due to blockades constructed along the coast. Any food that does pass the blockades is not able to be distributed among the civilians. Somalia. 1.5 million people stand at risk in Somalia, with 50,000 children facing death. This is the second famine in the last decade in Somalia, the first being in 2011, and is significantly worse than the first. Although the statistics are better than the estimated outcomes of 2.7 million people at risk in February, these 1.5 million have been classified as emergency phase 4 on the IPC and require immediate care in order to avoid starvation. Moreover, an additional 3.1 million people classify as stressed phase 3, resulting in a total of 4.6 million people suffering from severe food insecurity and requiring care in the near future. Somalia has been through a civil war where the country's government couldn't control the militias lying in its ground. Therefore, putting Somalia in a post-conflict zone region in order to combat this, humanitarian organizations have attempted to continue providing humanitarian assistance while simultaneously publicizing the issue and raising funds on its behalf. Reasons for food insecurity. Food security is defined as the access of a population to a reliable source of food and nutrition. Reliable in this context refers to the availability, access, utilization, and stability of the food source, and the probability that people will have access to a proper source of nutrition in the near future. Food insecurity is declared when it is highly probable that a demographic will not have access to a healthy source of nutrition in the near future, or they currently do not have access to such a source. Food insecurity is caused due to multiple reasons. As seen in the case of Somalia and Yemen above, civil war and political instability are some of the most widespread causes of malnutrition in the world. When a government or a population is focused primarily on ensuring day-to-day survival, therefore neglecting the sustainability of food resources. For instance, farms and agriculture fields may be ravaged by a population in crisis. Also, in other cases such as Rohingya refugees who fled away from their country because of the genocide happening in there, who are not able to sustain a regular source of nutrition in the refugee camps of neighboring countries. Another reason for food insecurity could be that refugee camps have reached their full capacity of endurance and cannot withhold any more refugees. UN aid and aid given by developed countries is currently not enough to sustain a living for people in refugee camps. There are currently 25.4 million refugees scattered around the world, and in some cases, such as Palestinian refugees in Jordan, these camps hold up to 1.5 million refugees at once. All of these are as countries go through conflict, farmlands and area where agricultural acts can be exercised are destroyed, therefore ruining the foundation where these countries build their agriculture off. Also, during this conflict, elder people who are experts in topics such as farming and harvesting are murdered due to conflict. This leaves the youth with no guidance on how to build up the agricultural industry after the gone of the elder.